There are points in life when you understand with a kind of brutal clarity that you are entirely alone. For me, that moment arrived on November 15th in a Manhattan law office, sitting in a leather chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "And to my granddaughter, Sarah Rodriguez," the lawyer read, his voice echoing off mahogany-paneled walls, "I leave nothing. Her choices have led her down a path I cannot support, and I will not reward failure with inheritance." Silence crashed over the room. Sophie's small hand slid into mine. My 7-year-old daughter didn't understand the words, but she felt the hurt. Her fingers trembled as she clung tighter, soaking up the grief that seemed to radiate off me like heat. Across the massive oak table sat what was left of my family. Marcus, 35, razor-sharp in a $3,000 suit, eyes like ice. Diana, 38, draped in jewelry that glittered like captured starlight, her smile triumphant and vicious. They had just inherited millions. Marcus got the Hamptons estate worth $2.3 million. Diana received the art collection and the Brooklyn brownstone, valued at $3.7 million. Even distant cousins were named, acknowledged, given a token piece of something. And I got nothing. I was 32, but exhaustion had etched lines into my face that made me look older. My hands were rough from years of cleaning offices and stocking shelves. I worked 3 jobs to keep Sophie fed. Breakfast shifts at Romano's Diner, afternoons cleaning downtown buildings, nights stocking a 24-hour supermarket. 4 hours of sleep was a good night. Sophie's father had walked out 3 years earlier without a note, a word, or a backward glance. "Well, that settles it then," Marcus said, leaning back with an easy arrogance that made my teeth clench. "Sarah, if you need a little help, a loan to get you through the month, we can discuss terms." The condescension was so thick it felt suffocating. I stood, my legs unsteady, and took Sophie's hand. "We don't need anything from you," I said. "We never have." It wasn't true, but it felt like armor. I was almost at the elevator when everything changed. "Miss Rodriguez, wait, please." A woman in her 50s hurried toward us, heels clicking on marble. "I'm Patricia Walsh," she said, slightly breathless. "I represent another estate that concerns you." She handed me a heavy, cream-colored envelope, my name written across it in elegant script. "This is from Evelyn Margaret Thorne. She passed away 6 weeks ago and left clear instructions that this be delivered after your grandmother's will was read." The name floated up from some dusty corner of memory. Evelyn Thorne, my grandmother's older sister. The one no one talked about. They'd stopped speaking long before I was born. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter written in shaky but determined handwriting. The script of someone who knew their time was almost gone. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "We met only once when you were 8 years old. You likely don't remember. I was your grandmother's older sister, though we stopped speaking over 70 years ago. I followed your life from afar. Through Christmas cards your mother sent before she died. Through newspaper clippings and photographs that eventually reached me. I know what your family did to you today. I know because they did the same to me. I married the wrong man according to them, and they erased me for it. But I built something beautiful anyway. The mansion at 417 Holloway Ridge Road in Silver Creek, New Hampshire is yours. There is something else you must know, something your grandmother never told you about our family. You'll understand when you find what I've left for you. Not because you are perfect, but because you endured. Just know this. Someone saw you, Sarah. Someone knew you were worth more than they ever said you were. Love, Evelyn." I read it twice. Something long dead inside me shifted. Silver Creek was 200 miles north. The weather reports were warning of the worst blizzard in 50 years. But Evelyn's words had lit a fire in me that nothing could smother. For the first time in years I felt something like hope. That night, I packed everything we owned that mattered into 2 suitcases and a duffel. I withdrew our last $300 in cash and told Sophie we were going on an adventure. "Are we going to live there?" she asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers. "Maybe, sweetheart," I said. "Maybe we are." We left at midnight, trying to outrun the storm. The highway was already nearly empty. Everyone with sense was home. Snow began around 2 a.m., slow, lazy flakes that thickened into a white curtain. By 3 I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The wind shoved at the car like a living thing. My hands clamped around the steering wheel until my knuckles blanched. Sophie slept in the back seat, Mr. Whiskers tucked beneath her chin, trusting without question that Mommy would get them there. At mile marker 42, the car hit black ice and started to slide. My father's voice rose up from memory, "Turn into the skid, don't fight it," and I did, hand steady even while my heart hammered. The car straightened. I exhaled shakily. "Please," I whispered to whatever might be listening, "just let us make it." The exit for Silver Creek loomed out of the storm like a miracle. The GPS led us off the main road onto smaller ones, then onto what might have been a private drive buried under 3 feet of snow. And there it was. The mansion rose from the darkness like something out of another century. Even half swallowed by the blizzard, it was breathtaking. 3 stories of weathered stone and timber, Gothic turrets, wraparound balconies, the kind of home built for wealth that expected to last. I pulled as close as I dared and killed the engine. "Sophie," I said softly, reaching back to touch her shoulder. "We're here." The key Patricia had given me slid perfectly into the massive oak door. It opened with a long, complaining groan, and a rush of frigid air chased us inside along with the snow. I stopped just inside the threshold, stunned. A grand staircase swept up into shadow, its mahogany railing carved with intricate designs. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings like frozen bursts of light. Marble floors stretched toward furniture shrouded in white sheets, the house looking like it had dressed itself up as a ghost. It was freezing inside, possibly colder than outside, but its grandeur struck straight through the numbness. "Is this really ours?" Sophie whispered, her voice echoing in the immense space. "Yeah, baby," I told her. "It really is." We explored by the weak glow of my phone's flashlight, room after room like pages of a fairy tale. A vast library with floor-to-ceiling shelves holding thousands of leather-bound books. A dining room with a table big enough for 20. A 1950s-style kitchen with old but solid appliances, and cabinets stocked with canned goods, rice and pasta. Evelyn had stocked it for someone. For us. On the second floor, I chose the smallest bedroom, a corner room with tall windows overlooking the snow-choked grounds and a 4-poster bed. I dragged in every blanket I could find. Sophie and I crawled beneath them fully clothed, wrapped around each other for warmth. "Tell me a story," she mumbled, already drifting. "Once upon a time," I whispered, "there was a girl who thought she had nothing. But then she learned she had everything that mattered. She had courage. She had love. And she had a daughter who made her want to be brave." Sophie's breathing evened out, but sleep avoided me. I lay awake, listening to the storm batter the house, and then heard something that froze every muscle in my body. Footsteps downstairs. Soft, measured. Not the random creaks of old wood expanding in the cold. Someone was moving through the rooms we had just explored. I slipped out of bed and grabbed my phone. The battery glowed at 12%. In my rush to escape Manhattan, I'd forgotten my charger. I eased the bedroom door open. The hallway stretched both ways, swallowed by darkness my phone's light barely touched. Another faint creak floated up from below, and my heart kicked faster. This was my house now. Whoever or whatever was down there, I had a right to know. I moved down the hallway and started down the staircase, each step groaning despite my efforts to be quiet. The entrance hall lay before me, painted silver by moonlight seeping through tall windows. Nothing moved, but in the beam of my flashlight, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Footprints. Fresh tracks in the dust on the marble floor, larger than mine or Sophie's, leading from the front door toward the library. "Hello." My voice came out small, lost in the cavernous space. Only the wind answered. I followed the prints to the library. The heavy door stood slightly ajar, though I was certain we'd closed it. Inside, the air smelled of leather and old paper. On a small table beside a wingback chair sat a leather-bound journal, lying open as if someone had just set it down. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run. Instead, I stepped closer. The handwriting matched Evelyn's letter, elegant, confident even in its shakiness. The open entry was dated just 5 months earlier. "I know my time is short," she had written. "The doctors give me weeks, perhaps days, but I have no regrets. This house has been my sanctuary against a world that tried to break me, and now it will be hers. Sarah doesn't know it yet, but she's stronger than anyone in that poisonous family ever gave her credit for. She'll find this journal when she's ready. She'll find everything when she's ready." Tears blurred the ink. This woman I could barely remember had seen me so clearly that she had written to a future she believed in. A whisper stirred the air, so soft I might have imagined it. "Welcome home." I spun around, heart pounding. Who's there? Nothing. Only the thick, expectant silence of a house that had seen too much. I backed out of the room and bolted upstairs. In our bedroom, I locked the door, jammed a chair under the handle, and lay awake until the first light of dawn thinned the dark. Morning transformed everything. The mansion that had loomed like a haunted castle became, in daylight, something close to magical. Sophie and I roamed like explorers, discovering a new treasure with every door we opened. In Evelyn's bedroom, Sophie found it. "Mommy, look!" she called, tapping at the edge of a full-length mirror. There was a narrow gap where the mirror's frame met the wall. When she pressed it, the mirror swung inward with a soft click, revealing a hidden passageway. We followed it upward in the dim light of my dying phone until it opened into a room that stole my breath. An artist's studio. Skylights flooded it with natural light. Finished and half-finished canvases leaned against the walls. Still lives, sweeping landscapes, portraits. The work was skilled, patient, practiced over decades. On the central easel stood an unfinished painting of the mansion in summer. The grounds awash in flowers, sunlight gilding the stone. In one upper window, two figures stood. A woman and a child. I stepped closer and felt my heart stutter. The woman looked exactly like me. The child exactly like Sophie. "She painted us," I whispered. "But how?" "She died before we ever came here." On a side table lay stacks of sketchbooks. I flipped through them, years of drawings, practice, and observations. On the last page of one, she had written, "For Sarah. When you find this place, this house gave me freedom. I hope it gives you the same. Look for the numbers where dreams were sworn." We kept exploring. Behind what appeared to be a plain linen closet, we found stairs to the third floor. They led to the old servants' quarters, most of them now used as storage. At the end of the hall, a stubborn door resisted until I leaned my full weight into it. It opened into a room that stretched the full width of the house. Someone had transformed it into a vault. Filing cabinets lined one wall, labeled by decade from 1940 to 2020. Glass cases held jewelry, rare coins, and what looked like stock certificates. In the center of the far wall, a massive safe had been built directly into the structure, its dark green paint and brass fittings gleaming under a film of dust. Above a small desk hung a framed poem in Evelyn's familiar hand. In 27 this house was born where 43 acres, dreams were sworn in 48 two hearts combined in 98 freedom. I did find numbers. Clues. She was giving me the combination, not in chronological order, but in the order that meant the most to her. I opened the filing cabinets and found the documents. The house had been built in 1927. The property spanned 43 acres. She married in 1948. Her divorce, her freedom, was finalized in 1998, ending 50 years of marriage. My palms were slick as I approached the safe. 43, 27, 48, I murmured, turning the dial. Each number locked into place with a heavy click, as if destiny itself were aligning. The last turn landed with a deep, satisfying thunk. The safe door swung open more easily than I expected. Fluorescent lights flickered on automatically, bathing the interior in harsh white. What I saw didn't look real. Stacks of bearer bonds in $100,000 denominations, banded and organized. Stock certificates for companies I recognized, even with my limited understanding: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. All purchased decades earlier when they had been worth almost nothing. On the walls, small paintings hung in glass-fronted cases, pieces even I knew were masterpieces. Shelves held property deeds to homes in 3 different states. Cases of rare coins gleamed like captured sunlight. At the center of it all, on a pedestal, rested a leather box. Inside, on top of neatly arranged folders, lay a handwritten inventory. Total assets as of June 2024, I read aloud. Bearer bonds, $87 million stock certificates, $112 million real estate holdings, $43 million art collection, $18 million rare coins and precious metals, $15 million total estimated value, $265 million. My knees gave way. I sat hard on the floor. staring at numbers that might as well have been another language. More money than I'd imagined existed. More than my family had ever allowed me to believe I could deserve. Enough to secure Sophie's future, and to do so much more. The rumble of engines outside snapped me out of my daze. I scrambled to the dormer window. Through the snowy glass, I saw a black SUV grinding up the drive, completely out of place in the quiet whiteness of Silver Creek. Minutes later, Marcus and Diana burst into the vault with two men in dark suits. I instinctively stepped in front of Sophie. "Well, well," Marcus said, taking in the room with a slow measuring gaze. "Look what we found. Our poor, struggling sister hiding out in a mansion. How the mighty have fallen, and risen again." "Get out," I said, straightening, finding steel in my voice I hadn't known I had. "This is my house. You're trespassing." Diana laughed, sharp, brittle, cutting. "Your house? Don't be ridiculous. We're family. What's yours is ours. Isn't that how this works?" One of the suits stepped forward, opening a briefcase. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Mrs. Thorne's will is being contested. Your relationship to the deceased is questionable, and until a court rules otherwise, all assets must be frozen. Patricia Walsh has been reported to the State Bar," Marcus added, his satisfaction barely concealed. "Conflict of interest. Mishandling of estate assets. Her license is under review." They'd moved fast. They'd used their connections exactly the way Evelyn had warned they would. "We're prepared to be generous," Diana said, producing a stack of papers. "Sign over your rights to the property, and we'll give you $50,000. More money than you've ever had in your life." "And if I don't?" I asked. The lawyer's smile never reached his eyes. "Then we litigate. This will be tied up in court for years. You'll spend everything you have and more fighting a war you cannot possibly win. Why not be sensible?" I looked at Sophie's frightened face, then at the safe full of Evelyn's carefully built life. Something inside me hardened. "No," I said, clear and steady. "Excuse me." Diana snapped. I said no. "This house is mine. Everything in it is mine. Evelyn left it to me because she understood something you never will. You can't have it." Marcus's expression sharpened, all pretense gone. "You're making a terrible mistake." "Maybe," I answered, feeling the truth of it settle calmly in my chest. "But it's mine to make. Now get out of my house." They left with threats and promises of legal annihilation, their footsteps echoing down the hall. I didn't follow. That night, after I'd tucked Sophie into bed, I sat in the library and read Evelyn's journals by candlelight. Page by page, the house ceased to be a stranger's. It became a map of a woman who had been exiled and had built an empire anyway. The next morning, salvation arrived in pickup trucks. A small convoy pulled into the drive. Men and women climbed out, bundled against the cold, carrying boxes and equipment. "Miss Rodriguez?" A woman about 60 approached, cheeks pink from the wind, brown eyes kind. "I'm Maggie Chen. I run the diner in town. We heard you might need a hand." A man in a sheriff's uniform stepped up beside her. "Tom Bradley," he said, holding out a gloved hand. "If anyone gives you trouble on this property, you call me." He pressed a card into my palm, his gaze steady. Direct line. An older man with silver hair and a worn leather briefcase came forward next. "Jack Morrison," he said. "Retired attorney. I knew Evelyn Thorne. I witnessed her will. I'd be honored to represent you. No fee." "Why?" I asked, overwhelmed. Maggie smiled softly. "Because for 40 years, Evelyn Thorne quietly held this town together. When the mill closed in 2008, she bought the building and turned it into affordable apartments. She paid medical bills when folks couldn't, funded scholarships, donated equipment to the clinic. She never wanted her name on anything, but we knew who was behind it." She shrugged. "We don't forget that kind of kindness." As they worked, getting the generator running, inspecting the furnace, showing me the house's ancient but solid systems, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The feeling of being protected by a community instead of preyed upon by a family. That evening Jack called. "Emergency hearing tomorrow at 10, he said. "Judge Marianne Fletcher. She's tough but fair, and she's not impressed by big city bullies." The Silver Creek Courthouse was an old marble building that looked like it had been planted there to stay forever. I arrived early in my best dress, Sophie's hand small and warm in mine. Marcus and Diana waited inside with 3 high-priced lawyers, radiating smug confidence. Judge Fletcher entered. A woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the thick stack of documents before her. "This emergency motion," she said, "alleges that Sarah Rodriguez is unlawfully occupying property belonging to the estate of Evelyn Thorne and poses a risk to assets valued at over $200 million. Marcus's lead attorney rose, oozing practiced courtesy. "Your Honor, our clients are Mrs. Thorne's legitimate blood relatives. Miss Rodriguez's connection is tenuous at best. She never lived here, never maintained a relationship with the deceased, and now suddenly appears to claim a vast inheritance. It strongly suggests fraud and undue influence." Jack stood unhurried. "Sure. Your Honor, I personally witnessed Mrs. Thorne's will 6 months before her death. She was entirely of sound mind. She was deliberate in her decision to leave her estate to Sarah Rodriguez, who is absolutely a blood relative. The will was executed according to state law, with 3 independent witnesses. The will's execution is compromised," opposing counsel pressed. Patricia Walsh had clear conflicts of interest and Ms. Walsh's ethics complaint, Jack cut in smoothly, was filed only after petitioners learned they were not receiving what they assumed they were owed. "It is retaliatory and baseless." Judge Fletcher turned her attention fully on me. "Miss Rodriguez, did you know Mrs. Thorne before her death?" I stood with my knees shaking. "No, Your Honor. Not really. My mother told me we met once when I was 8, but I don't remember. Mrs. Thorne followed my life from a distance through letters my mother sent. She chose to leave me her estate because she saw her own story in mine. She was disowned for marrying the wrong man. So was I. She survived that and wanted me to have the chance to too." The room fell silent except for the faint hiss of snow against old windows. Judge Fletcher studied me for a long moment, then glanced back at the file. "I've lived in this county for 40 years, she said slowly, "and I knew Evelyn Thorne personally. She was brilliant, stubborn, and fiercely independent. If she wished to leave her estate to her great-niece rather than to relatives who never visited, never called, and returned her letters unopened, that was her right." She set her pen down with finality. "The emergency motion is denied. We had won the first round." Outside, Marcus grabbed my arm in a bruising grip. "This isn't over," he hissed. "We'll appeal. We'll file again. We'll make your life hell until you sign over what's rightfully ours." Before I could respond, Sheriff Bradley stepped between us. "Let her go," he said evenly, "or I'll arrest you for assault." Marcus released me, but his eyes burned with promise. "You can't hide behind these small-town nobodies forever." "I'm not hiding," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my own voice. "I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere." The next 3 months slipped by as winter slowly loosened its grip on Silver Creek. The legal war raged on paper and in hearings, but real life, took root in the cracks. Sophie thrived at the small local school, making friends, bringing home drawings, chattering about her teacher. People from town kept showing up with casseroles, space heaters, firewood, and advice on surviving country winters in a drafty mansion. I sank hours into Evelyn's journals. In their pages, she moved from myth to flesh. A young secretary who'd married an inventor whose automotive patent eventually brought them wealth. A woman who, after losing her husband, quietly turned that money into a fortune through patient, brilliant investing. Yet for all her success, the pages were threaded with loneliness. Then in a 2018 entry, the tone shifted. "Found her," she wrote. "My sister's granddaughter. Working 3 jobs, raising a daughter alone. Fighting battles I remember too well. She is everything I was before I had money as a weapon. She deserves those weapons now." The final hearing was scheduled for March 15. Marcus and Diana had hired one of Manhattan's most expensive law firms, burning through what remained of their own inheritances in the process. They were determined to break the will. The courtroom was packed with Silver Creek residents by the time we arrived. Maggie waved from the back. Sheriff Bradley nodded. The quiet solidarity of those faces gave me more courage than any speech could have. Jack was ready. He presented medical evaluations confirming Evelyn's mental clarity. He walked the judge through the proper execution of the will. Then he laid out records I hadn't known existed. In 196, Marcus and Diana had tried to have Evelyn declared incompetent, hoping to gain control of her assets then too. Opposing counsel insisted on calling it deep concern for an elderly relative. The paperwork told a different story. And then Jack dropped the real bomb. "Your Honor," he said, stepping forward with a sealed manila envelope. "During discovery, we located documents Mrs. Thorne instructed be opened only if her will was contested. They include extensive family genealogy and DNA test results that reveal a long-concealed truth." He handed copies to the judge and to the other side. "Sarah Rodriguez is not just Mrs. Thorne's great-niece through her sister's line," he continued. "DNA evidence shows she is also Mrs. Thorne's biological great-granddaughter, the result of a family secret buried for 70 years. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Marcus and Diana stared at the papers, their faces draining of color. The records show that Evelyn's younger sister, Sarah's grandmother, had an affair. Jack went on, unflinching. The child from that affair, Sarah's mother, was in fact Evelyn's biological granddaughter, not merely her niece. This clarifies the unusually strong connection Mrs. Thorne felt to Sarah and explains her absolute certainty about leaving the estate to her. Judge Fletcher studied the charts and lab reports in silence. "These documents appear scientifically sound and properly authenticated," she said. "Legally, they do not affect the will's validity, but they certainly bolster Mrs. Thorne's decision and wholly undermine any claim of improper beneficiary selection." Her ruling was swift. "The contest is denied in its entirety. Mrs. Thorne's will stands as written, and will be enforced without further interference from the petitioners." And just like that it was over. Marcus and Diana stormed out, their high-powered lawyers trailing behind. They had lost everything: money, reputation, the fortune they'd assumed was theirs by right. The victory felt strangely hollow until I understood what it truly meant. I wasn't just inheriting wealth. I was stepping into a legacy, a bloodline of women who refused to let rejection write their stories. 8 months later, they came back. They looked smaller somehow. Their clothes were still expensive but rumpled. The sharp arrogance had been worn down by reality. "We came to apologize," Marcus said quietly, standing in my office on the mansion's second floor. "We were wrong. About you. About Evelyn. About what we thought we deserved." I studied them. Without the armor of entitlement, they looked like exactly what they were. Two people who had made ruinous choices and were now paying the price. "Is there anything we can do to make this right?" Diana asked, voice raw. I opened my desk drawer and took out 2 forms. "The Evelyn Thorne Foundation is hiring regional coordinators," I said. "Entry level. $40,000 a year. The work is hands-on, with families who are where I was a few years ago." They stared at the applications as if I'd placed live grenades on the desk. "Why would you offer us this?" Diana whispered. "After everything we did?" "Because Evelyn believed in second chances," I said. "Even for people who might not seem to deserve them." They took the forms and left. I later heard they accepted the jobs, working quietly and humbly for 2 years before leaving Silver Creek to start over somewhere else. That too felt like a kind of justice. With a portion of Evelyn's fortune, I established the foundation in her name, a $100 million endowment dedicated to one simple mission: helping single mothers rebuild their lives. Transitional housing, job training, child care assistance, microloans for small businesses. The things I had needed and never had. The mansion's ground floor became a community space. The library opened its doors to the public and filled with people discovering worlds inside Evelyn's thousands of books. The art studio turned into a creative hub where local artists worked and taught. 2 years after the final court decision, I stood in what had once been the vault. The safe door remained permanently open, but the room had been transformed into a children's reading center. Bright rugs covered the floor. Low shelves brimmed with picture books and chapter books. Sophie, 10 now, sat cross-legged in a circle of kids, leading a writing workshop with a seriousness that made my heart ache and swell at once. On the back wall of the empty safe, we'd framed a copy of Evelyn's original inventory. Beneath it, I'd added my own note. $265 million received and transformed. Used to help 147 families find stability, fund 412 scholarships, create 127 jobs, and build hope where none existed. Balance remaining. Enough. More than enough. Thank you, Evelyn, for seeing me when my own family couldn't. That evening, as a light March snow began to fall, I walked through the house, laughing voices echoing down halls that had once known only quiet. What had been Evelyn's fortress against the world had become my bridge to it, a place where exile had turned into welcome, and one woman's survival had multiplied into many. I thought of the exhausted woman who had sat in that Manhattan law office, told she was a failure. The one who'd believed it. She was gone. In her place stood someone new, shaped by a stranger's faith, by a town's kindness, by a child's unshakable trust. Evelyn hadn't just given me money. She'd given me proof that I mattered. Proof that enduring counted as its own kind of success. And I had taken that proof and turned it outward, using it to build doors for others who'd been shut out. At the library window, I watched snow drift across the dark grounds, softening edges, making everything look clean and new again. Somewhere downstairs, a child laughed. Somewhere, Sophie's voice carried a story forward. The best inheritance isn't wealth. It's the courage to lift someone else once you've finally been lifted yourself. In that truth, I'd found something that would outlast any fortune: purpose. The woman who'd once been invisible had become an architect of hope. And Sophie was already building on that foundation, one small, determined act at a time. The story was only beginning.